Hi, how's it going? This is Resin of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. Here to review episode 16 of Dark Shadows, narrated by Alexander Mulkey Isles, written by Art Wallace, directed by Leela Swift. Um, Vicky here, she's in the drawing room, she's looking out the window. Um, in the previous episode, they had learned that Roger wrecked his car, and Vicky is waiting for news about Roger's accident. Um, as she closes the window back, the phone rings. Vicky, I love how Alexander looks. She jumps a bit. Great acting by her. Um, just a really well written set of scenes here, and good, obviously good dialogue. But the win here is the reaction and the facial features and the body motion and posture that the actors are making in these a lot of these episodes, because it really helps sell their characters too. Um, Victoria goes over the phone. She answers it. You don't hear Bill Malloy's voice or see Bill Malloy or Roger in this episode, but it is, we hear from Vicky that it's Bill Malloy. He's calling, to tell Elizabeth, uh, with word about Roger's car accident, that he's okay. He's got some bumps and bruises, but they are taking him over to a doctor. Um, and no, it is not. It is not the doctor you think it is. It's there's a doctor they talk about in this episode named Doctor Reeves, and that's the doctor that's going to both is supposed to be examining Roger. So you hear in this episode that Doctor Elizabeth says Doctor Reeves, and Vicky says yeah, because that's what Doctor he told uh, Victoria, that Bill Malloy told Victoria, that Bill Malloy was going to take Roger to the doctor, and he was going to go examine the accident some more. Um, Elizabeth is hung up on, especially in that she's thinking about how Burke has come back to town. Now her brother's had an accident. He hasn't had an accident going off that hill um, until Burke returned. Um, Mrs. Stoddard, Elizabeth, she's frustrated by the whole thing. She feels helpless. Vicky does tell her, "Hey, all you can do is wait." And Elizabeth's line is really good. She says, "Wait, that's all it seems I've done all my life is wait." And what she's talking about is, she feels she murdered her husband. She's waiting for the skeleton to get out the closet. She's been waiting for 18 years here on the grounds in the house. Um, Sort of to do a bit of a recap about the character Elizabeth. Now, she does leave the house. She doesn't go off the property, though. We see at the Blue Whale that Burke is coming back from the jukebox after giving the coin, uh, sawing his plane. Um, Burke insists that they address each other on a first name basis. Um, Joe Joe is not having any of this. He does not want to be around Burke. He does not want Burke around him. Despite Carolyn's feelings, this to me is where Joe finally starts, bucking Carolyn. He's growing, a set of balls, and you're like, no, I'm this right here. Really, really great job by Joel Carruthers portraying. And again, I don't feel Joe is like a coward or anything. He'll throw down, but I think it's at times where he's like not. he's firm with Carolyn in this episode, but early on, you sort of saw this guy let Carolyn control him. Now he's just frustrated and mad. And I like that. I like this right here where you're developing a character a little bit further with Joe. That's what it feels like the writers are doing here. They're letting they've displayed Joe has a temper. They're showing in this episode he's not afraid to take the temper out on Carolyn. And that's something I really like. Um, to we also get that um, what was I saying? Burke keeps telling Joe it's a waste of time to try to understand women. um, you know, Burke asks him, "Weren't you supposed to meet somebody here?" And he says, "Yeah, her uncle, but I'm not sad that he's late." Um, really, really good dialogue here. This episode is just pure fun to watch, despite the heavy tone they're putting on about the car accident. It is a fun episode. I will say that one of my favorite parts in this, again, I've talked about this with Dark Shadows before, that again, you don't get to see Bill Malloy, you don't get to see Roger, but they're mentioned pretty heavily in this episode. You also get a mention of Matthew Morgan. He is in this episode, his character. The actor who first played him, I believe this is his final episode uh, playing the character. I think Thayer David's going to take over the rest of the way. What Joe is making a phone call. Burke uh, has the bartender bring them some drinks. Um, Burke is telling Carolyn that Joe's worked hard. Joe is working for, you know, dating Carolyn, working to get his boat. That is in a sense trying to take, working in life is in a sense, working for your goals in life is in a sense taking control of your life because you're working to get what you wanted. Not just taking it because you can. It's easy to take. What Burke's really trying to say, and this is where you sort of like Burke a lot, because what he's really trying to tell Carolyn, like, yeah, when you have the means, it's easy to just grab and take something, but not everybody has that means. He may not be saying it, but that's in a sense to me what he's saying. And like, okay, you can't really compare. What he's also trying to do is, sorry, you can't really compare me and Joe, other than though we're from the town. Because she says that you wouldn't. I bet you wouldn't have stayed here. He goes, I didn't have a choice. I had to leave. And she goes, why? He goes, why don't you ask your uncle? And she goes, oh, I will. When when we go back to Collinwood, Liz is in the kitchen. Elizabeth calls Matthew and tells him to meet her there. That it's important. She didn't mean to wake him. Um, when Vicky comes back down a food tray, bringing a food tray that was in David's room, Mrs. Stoddard, um, if she knew about Matthew's accident 17 years earlier, she actually tells her that it was 17 years earlier too. And Vicky says, "Yeah, he told me about it. He was telling me about it. That Matthew was telling him, but that Matthew's car went off, like had an accident, same spot Rogers was. Where the Rogers went off the road. Um, it's lucky that Roger was alive and all that. Matthew's going to say something similar too. Um, Liz regrets really, really seems to ponder and regret having Roger bring David here. That this is no place to grow up. Young people, this is no place for young people. There's death and decay here. And Vicky says, well, Carolyn has seemed to manage, and she says, "You think so?" Liz says that to Vicky, and I do think this is just Vicky trying to ease Liz's mind, but her mind's gonna get uneased here real soon. Um, Liz says if anything would happen to Carolyn, that she would just die, would destroy her. Um, Again, Carolyn's her daughter. So Vicky, she's still in the kitchen. She's preparing a tray of tea. Matthew comes into the kitchen. He's sort of wondering. Well, he is wondering why if Mrs. Stoddard's all right. He asks Vicky that. Vicky's, oh yeah, she's fine. She's just get some pills. Matthew wait, and he says, "Do you want it?" He does ask Vicky if she knows what Mrs. Stoddard wanted. She goes, "It's best that she says what tells you." Vicky's not trying to be heavily involved, but she is involved in a sense, in more than just a sense. Um, Liz comes back and she's trying to see if Matthew will admit to either A, messing up the inspection of the car, or B, if the brakes did fail. Liz is doing sort of her own investigation in a lot of ways. And Matthew says, excuse me, ma'am, but why isn't your brother making these complaints to me? And she goes, you don't like my brother too much. And he's like, no. So this is another person who does not like Roger. Beautiful, beautiful. Um, everybody hates Roger. Uh, it's like it's Lewis Edmonds. How could you do that? Roger makes it easy. So, as my phone's ringing, sorry about that. But so there's Liz is interrogating Matthew. Finally, Matthew says, "Ma'am, I had this brake. I'm telling you the truth. I had the brakes checked 2 days ago, and they worked fine. I would never. I may not like your brother, but I would not tamper with his brakes." And you know, she's like, "Tampered?" He is. If those brakes failed, it's because somebody messed around with them. And Matthew states this very matter of fact, and I love that line from him. I love Thayer David, the actor who originally plays Matthew. Really, really good actor. Um, George Mitchell, solid, solid performance. I mean, just really enjoyed him as Matthew. Did a great job for the episodes he was in. I mean, Thayer Davids again is going to carry the character the rest of the way. He doesn't do a bad job at all. Back at the Blue Whale, Burke is watching from the table as Carolyn and Joe are dancing on the floor. And between dances, Carolyn comes over to invite Burke to dance. Burke starts to get up from his chair, but he's like, "Nah, that's too. I'm too old for that." Basically, Mitchell Ryan's character Burke Devlin pulls a Murtaugh. I'm too old for this shit. He doesn't say that line, but that's what he's saying. I'm too old for that that stuff. Really, really good. Just I love the little. I'm too old for that. And he says it so like smoothly. And Carolyn says, "Well, I'll show you." And he looks at Joe and he goes, "Nah, the last dance partner you had, your Joe punched the guy. I think punched the guy in the ribs. I think he'd punch me too." And Joe says, "Yes, I would." Carolyn, there's a bit of an argument between Joe and Carolyn. Burke gets in between them because you don't need to be fighting. Um, as they Burke is tired of waiting. He's going to go back to his hotel room. Carolyn says, "Let's go to that movie, Joe." Um, I really like this scene here, and this is my favorite scene here because again, Burke is trying to plant, a seed of distrust, not just between Joe and Carolyn. He's really trying to get Carolyn to sympathize for him, and she is buying it hook, line, and sinker. Again, does it make the character dumb? No, the character is just gullible. Gullibility is a part of being a human being. People tend to be gullible. Um, it makes the character just more realistic, in my view. And I appreciate the writers for doing it. They're not trying to treat the audience like they're dumb. They're just trying to make sure the characters make real human mistakes to let the audience know, hey, there's emotion here because they're prone to make mistakes like real people because characters are fictional people. Joe he's had enough. He grabs his coat and he just hightails it out of Blue Well, leaving Burke and Carolyn. Burke tells Carolyn, "Get your coat. We're gonna go after Joe." Carolyn doesn't want to, but Burke's like, "Nah, I think I've caused enough trouble." um, Phone rings. Elizabeth answers it in the foyer, and it's a reporter. And reporters keep calling. Vicky actually answers the phone uh, here and tells him she doesn't want to. She can't come to the phone. She can't answer questions right now. I love Matthew. Who he enters the room during the phone call, and Vicky does ask Matthew if he's seen the car, and he says, "Yeah, the one side is all dead, and it's amazing he wasn't killed." Matthew's talking about Roger. Um, you know, Liz asked if he managed to get a close look at the car. Asked Matthew if he got a close look. He says, "Yeah," but he didn't want to get too close because there was a photographer there asking questions. Oh, by the way, also in this episode, you hear about the constable's office is is looking into the accident. So this is where you're going to get Constable Jonas Carter. So that's why you see a fictional constable in the episodes to come. Like I said, Constable Jonas Carter investigates the Bleeder Valve case. This episode, you get the mention of the constables looking into the accident. It's constables, but generally they do just assign. It's either one or two. I've said this before. My uncle was a constable, and anytime I'd ever see him, he'd either be by himself or he'd be with somebody, one or two or maybe three. It depends on the situation, obviously. That's just, again, I'm trying to remember from my childhood. So, also in this, you have Vicky. uh, Elizabeth wants to call the movie theater and find out you know, to try to get a hold of Carol and tell her about Roger, her uncle. Finally, Vicky tells she didn't want to worry Liz, and I understand that again. But here's Elizabeth saying, and she tells Liz, I don't think she went to the movies. She wanted to go to the Blue Whale, and Liz says, did she know that Burke was going to be there? And she shook her head, yes. And she goes, I don't think it's anything to worry about. And Liz is like, you don't know Carolyn, not really. She's What Liz is essentially saying here, Carolyn is very gullible. So Carolyn is pretty much a child at heart. She's prone to get her heart broken. Um, the difference between a car and Carolyn is a car's damage can be repaired. A person generally can't. Which again, I love the lines and great job by everybody. Um, Vicky's just trying to encourage, was is trying to be encouraging. Um, Vicky says she's probably on her way home. Mrs. Stoddard says, "No, I doubt that." Carolyn left the blue whale with Burke. So great, great, great episode. I listen. Again, my favorite scene was between Joe and Carolyn, between the blue whale. Um, Again, I love the mention of the characters that aren't in the episode, because one thing Dark Shadows does religiously is, though a character is not there, they will mention them to keep them fresh. Great, great job. Very well written by Art Wallace. Again, Leela Swift is my favorite director, and I know she directed a lot of Dark Shadows episodes, but just her camera work is superb. Really, really great job. And again, Dan Curtis Productions, the production crew always, did the production crew of Dark Shadows always put their best foot forward, and often enough times, more often than not, it shows. It shows how good the production value really was, especially in these beginning episodes, and then even later on when I get into that. I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm trying to take my time. Hope you guys have a good night. I'll see you.